Good morning, members, officers and any members of the public who are viewing the live stream. Welcome to this meeting of South Cambridgeshire District Council Planning Committee on the 9th of July 2025. My name is Councillor Anna Bradnam and I'm the chair of the committee. And I'm going to ask the members to introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with Councillor Eileen Wilson. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Councillor Eileen Wilson. I'm the member for Cottenham Ward.
Thank you. And Councillor Khan?
I'm Councillor Martin Khan, one of the members for Histon and Impington Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Khan?
Councillor Ariel Khan, member for Horston and Cumberton Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Garvey? Microphone. Microphone.
Councillor Garvey from Girton, Drayton and Madingley.
Thank you. Councillor Sandford? Okay. Councillor Sandford, we're glad to have you with us. Councillor Rickson?
Councillor James Rickson from Histon and Impington Ward.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Councillor Redrup, one of the members for Harston and Compton Ward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hawkins?
Good morning. Timmy Hawkins, Caldercote Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Williams?
Oh, thank you. Councillor Richard Williams, I represent the Whittlesford Ward.
Thank you. And Councillor Ellington?
Good morning. I'm Councillor Sue Ellington from Swavesey Ward and I'm substituting for Heather Williams.
Thank you very much. And we'll now introduce the officers. So starting at the far end, Charlotte?
Hi, Charlotte Spencer, Principal Planning Officer.
Thank you, Charlotte. And Rebecca?
Rebecca Smith, Delivery Manager.
Thank you very much. And Vanessa?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Vanessa Blaine. I'm the Senior Planning Lawyer.
Thank you. And Sarah?
Sarah Steed, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. And Erin?
Good morning, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you very much indeed. Lovely. Oh, right. Okay. So everyone, we need to project. We need to use our microphones closer to us so that everybody at the far end can hear. Okay? So please speak clearly. Right. So members, those in the chamber are reminded that the meeting is being live streamed. By your presence here in the chamber and via video conference, you are deemed to have consented to being filmed and to the use of images and sound recordings for a webcast and archived recording. May I ask those who are joining us remotely to ensure that their camera and microphone remain off unless they're addressing the committee. And if a member arrives after the start of an application or leaves the chamber once an application has commenced, they will not be able to take any further part in that application, either by entering into the debate, questions of clarification, or the vote. So, item 2 is apologies. We've received apologies from Councillor Peter Fain and from Councillor Heather Williams, and Councillor Goring Garvey and Councillor Sue Ellington are attending as substitutes, for which we thank you. Are there any other apologies, Sarah?
Chair, there's no other apologies, but as Councillor Peter Fain isn't present today, we will need to elect a vice chair for this meeting.
Thank you very much. And I would like, so yes, we need to appoint a vice chair for this committee meeting, and I would like to nominate Councillor Peter Sandford. Can I have a seconder for that? Oh, Councillor Hawkins, thank you very much. Okay, thank you. So Peter, would you like to come and join me? Oh, sorry, there's a matter of a vote. Yes, all good point. So can we just vote for that, please? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Lovely. very much indeed. So, item 3 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Please, could any councillors declare if they have any declarations of interest and also identify which application their declaration refers to? We've only got one item on the agenda today, so that might be fairly evident. If, as the meeting proceeds, you realise you have an interest, please would you raise it at that point? So, item 4 is the minutes. This is the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of June, which have been submitted to this meeting for approval. So if there are any matters of accuracy, please could members raise them now. Otherwise the minutes will be approved as a correct record. I have looked them through and they seem to be fine to me. No? Yep, exactly. So I'm going to sign those. Thank you very much. Right, okay. So I've got a small announcement here, which is congratulations to the Greater Cambridge Planning team. Because before we move on to the substantive part of the meeting, I'd like to take a moment to congratulate the Greater Cambridge Shared Planning team, who won the RTPI Planning Authority of the Year Award on the 18th of June 2025. And I'd just like to thank all the officers for the hard work and inventiveness and thoughtfulness that has gone into winning that award. Thank you very much. Well done. Councillor Khan, did you want to speak?
They also won the East of England Planning Award for, I think it's Innovation. And I'd like to congratulate them on having the second award as well, which is...
Okay. Thank you. So East of England Award as well. Well done. Thank you. We move now on to consider the planning applications, and the process for considering the application is as follows. The case officer will give a brief introduction to the report. The committee then may ask questions of clarification to the case officer. Then the registered public speakers will be invited to speak for 3 minutes each. In fact, in the case of objectors, we have 2 objectors, so they will have 1.5 minutes each. The committee may then ask questions of clarification to the case officer, not to the speakers. And the committee will then debate the item, and public speakers are not permitted to take part in the debate. So at the end of the debate and conclusion of any questions, providing there's no alternative proposal, the officer recommendation will be read out, and I will request a proposer and seconder for the recommendation. I will ask members to vote on the recommendation. If a recommendation for approval or refusal falls, an alternative proposal must be made, which will require a seconder and must then be voted on, and the voting will be recorded. Okay, so we come to agenda item 5. Sorry, Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to check a quick point of procedure. You said there were 2 objectors and they get 1.5 minutes each. Is that because they're sharing a slot? Or are they 2 separate objectors? Because they're 2 separate objectors.
2 separate objectors on the same...
They don't get 3 minutes each?
No, they get 1.5. The objectors have always had the same amount of time as the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. No, he can... No. Excuse me. What is it you wanted, Councillor Hales? Yeah, you're registered. You'll be called in due course. Yeah. The application that we're looking at is 25/00566/out, And this is the land to the south of North End, Meldreth. Our first report at page 7 is an outline application with all matters reserved, except for access, for the demolition of the existing turkey farm and the redevelopment for up to 38 dwellings and associated landscaping. And Charlotte Spencer, Principal Planning Officer, will present the report. Thank you very much, Charlotte.
Thank you, Chair. So as the Chair just explained, it's an outline application with all matters reserved except for access for up to 38 dwellings, replacing the existing turkey farm. It's been brought to committee as it was called in by the Parish Council, and it represents a departure from the local plan. Just a couple of updates following the publication of the report. So firstly, there is a typo within the report at table 8, paragraph 24.5. Accidentally, there was an additional number put in on the under the open space section of the contributions, and it should actually read £4,342 and 8 pence. There was a late third-party comment received on the 7th of July, which provided comments on the officer's consideration of the planning balance. Just to kind of summarise this, they thought that the weight to be given to the self-build should only be limited. They disagreed with the consideration that the scheme could make a positive contribution to the character of the area. They considered that the turkey farm is currently not a bad neighbour, and they disagreed with the weight towards the BNG due to potential impacts on the existing biodiversity. In addition, they repeated their concerns about being outside the development framework and 38 dwellings in a group village, and the loss of, I think that's supposed to be the agricultural land. They also raised the concern that the interior site roads are not to be adopted, which could potentially mean up to 76 refuse bins having to be accommodated on North End. Based on that last comment, we got further clarification from the waste officer regarding whether they would enter the site, and this was received on the 8th of July and put online. And they did confirm that provided the new road, the lane, which you'll see on the plans shortly, is designed and constructed to adopted standards, then the refuge vehicle will enter the site to undertake refuge collections, as they're happy that the area of the road being narrowed is minimal and a straight section. However, the refuge vehicle will not enter the private shared drives, so bin collection points will be needed to be provided on the lane. So moving on to the location of the site. The site is approximately 2.4 hectares. It lies to the south of North End, behind numbers 42, 44, 56 to 62 North End. Number 44 does lie within the red outline. All of these are residential properties. To the south lies open fields, and the railway runs about 200 metres to the south. You see this aerial. Also just have some aerial views here, showing the residential properties with the open fields behind. And then this bottom one just shows this site in relation to the village of Meldreth. So it's at the northern side of the village. The village hall is here, the railway station is here, the shop is about here, and the pub is about here. So it was requested by members on the site visit just to have a map to show the neighbour representations. So the blue are those that have objected, and the green are those that have made neutral comments. I've just kind of shown the ones which aren't shown on this map, because I think if I zoomed out too much, it would lose what members wanted to see. So to show these neighbours along here, along North End, have objected, and a few on this side as well. Moving on to the constraints. The site, with the exception of the existing curtilage for number 44, lies outside but immediately adjacent to the Malduff development framework, shown by the black dash line. The Malduff conservation area is the violet colour here, and the site is in proximity to some listed buildings. We've got the Grade 1 Church of Holy Trinity here, and then Grade 2 buildings down here, which are Mill House and Top Cliffs Mill at number 36 North End. There are two nearby public footpaths. So we've got one running to the east of the site, shown by the purple line here, crossing the railway, leading down to Melbourne. And the other is to the west, leading down here, along the River Mell, going into Malduff. There is a TPO in the northeastern corner of the site. Here. The site lies within flood zone 1 and is not at risk from surface water flooding, and the site lies on Grade 2 agricultural land, which is considered best and most versatile. So these are just some photos of the existing site. The site is currently in use as a turkey farm. It is understood that it is currently running at 10,000 turkeys per annum, but does have the capacity to rear just under 40,000 turkeys. The majority of the barns are approximately 4 metres high to the top of the roof level, with the open-sided storage approximately 7 metres high, and a number of silos about 8 metres high. Okay, so moving on to the proposed scheme. The scheme seeks to provide up to 38 dwellings on the site. All matters except for access are reserved, so this is an indicative plan, site plan only, demonstrating how 38 dwellings could fit onto the site. The access would run through the curtilage of number 44, between the house and the boundary with number 56. Just to point out, the lane that the waste officer was referring to is this main kind of thoroughway here, and then these private areas are where the waste would not be picked up. Moving on to the access plan, which is a matter to be considered under this application. So the width of the access, I think the numbers are quite small here. So it'll be 6 metres here where it joins North End, and then it narrows down to 3.7 metres for about 30 metres as it passes between number 44 and 56. This would mean as it passes these properties, it would not be sufficient width for 2 cars to pass, and so signs would be erected to ensure that priority is given to those entering the site to avoid any potential queuing along North End. A raised table would also be added to encourage speed reduction. And then this is just showing the details of the works to the verge in more detail. So the scheme is proposing a footpath along the verge north of the existing ditch. No works to the ditch would take place outside of this red line. And this would allow pedestrians to move away from the junction to a safe place to cross to where the footpath runs on the north of North End. So for clarification reasons, I've had a few questions about the trip generation. So these tables are taken from the transport assessment submitted by the applicant. So the trip generation is about 21 movements in the AM peak hours and around 21 movements in the PM peak hours. And this does not meet the threshold of 30 additional trips in the AM and PM peaks for the local Highways Authority Transport Assessment Team to review the application. The existing trip generation given by a third party of about 12 trips per day at its peak, and that means the peak of when the turkey farm is running at its peak. So based on that, it won't be more than the 30 for the Highways Transport Assessment Team to review the application. Okay, so moving on to the parameter plan, whilst the indicative site plan would not be approved, the applicants have submitted this, which can be an approved document to ensure that at reserve matter stage, the scheme will achieve the key place-making principles. Some key points to show here is the areas of built form, the grey being limited to 2 stories in height, with the light salmon colour being limited to 2.5 stories in height. The pink line denotes the primary frontages that will be made. There will be an area of key open space centrally within the site, and there will be informal open space along the southern boundary. The plan also does identify the close relationship up here with the neighbours along North End. And I'm not sure if it's that clear with the yellow on the grey, but there's 2 stars here showing that this area would be used for self and custom build.
Charlotte, could you just clarify, the salmon area, what was the story height there?
2.5.
2.5, and the rest was 2?
The rest was 2. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So the applicants have also submitted a design code which expands on the parameter plan and would also be an approved document and provides rules to bridge the gap between the key principles of the parameter plan and the reserved matters application. I haven't screenshotted all of the design code, just a couple of key points taken here. So it provides more details on building lines, active frontages. There's some details about the open space, highlighting it would include a community orchard, informal play space and rest areas, and there'll be a play along the way on the southern boundary. And again, it shows the plan for the site edges. So they point out that the northern boundary, with that sensitive distance to the neighbouring properties, sufficient space would be given, and a minimum of 10 metres would be provided on the southern boundary to create a buffer to the open countryside. They've also just given some images of what the development could potentially look like. They have also included an illustrative landscape plan, which shows how suitable landscape could be achieved on site. As part of the landscape visual appraisal, the applicants included some indicative views. So this view is taken from the public footpath to the east of the site, about halfway between the site and the railway line. So we've got the existing view, proposed indicative view, winter year 1 with the yellow line showing the height of 2-storey buildings, which they state is measured at approximately 8.1 metres high. I think I did accidentally cut it off, but it also states that at this view, the higher 2.5-storey buildings would not be visible behind the 2-storey dwellings. And then finally, we have one at the summer at year 15, once the proposed landscaping had been established. And again, so this is views taken from the other side of the railway line. Sure if that's over clear, you can see the orange line just above it here. And again, the views at 15 years once the established landscaping is there. So these are just some mock-ups taken from the applicant's design and access statement, suggesting how some of the areas would look and appear. And then some mock-up elevations from the south, demonstrating the distance between the existing and proposed. So in conclusion, officers acknowledge that this is an unbalanced decision. In terms of the harm, the application represents a departure from the local plan as the site lies outside the development framework and proposes up to 38 dwellings within a group village. Officers consider that as the proposed development replaces existing buildings and hardstanding and is located immediately adjacent to the framework boundary, the level of encroachment into the countryside and level of unsustainability is limited. The amount of development would greatly exceed the recommended 8 dwellings within a group village. However, as Meldriff is in close proximity to Melbourne, which is a minor rural centre and benefits from a train station serving both Cambridge and London, officers consider that Meldriff is one of the more sustainable group villages. 38 dwellings would make the best use of the site, and whilst the impact on services can be mitigated to some degree by way of monetary contributions, it is considered that this would result in moderate harm. The development would result in the loss of best and most versatile land. However, due to the difficulties in either reverting the land for crops or improving the poultry farm, officers consider that this attracts limited weight within the planning balance. In terms of the benefits, the proposal would result in additional housing, 40% of which would be affordable. However, as the council can demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply and the quantum of affordable housing is the minimum required by policy, this attracts limited benefits. The proposal would provide some self/custom build. The council currently has a shortfall of 456 self-build plots. Whilst in the past, planning inspectors have provided significant weight to the provision of self-build, as the site is not fully self-build and it's only reasonable to require 5%, officers consider that this should only be given moderate weight. The current site compromises agricultural building and hard standing, which is considered not to contribute positively to the area, and notwithstanding the reserved matters, officers consider that the scheme has the potential to positively contribute to the character and appearance of the area. Moderate weight can be afforded to this. The existing use of the site is a turkey farm. Poultry farms can generate noise, odour, dust and other environmental issues, and as such it would be unlikely that any new poultry farm would be granted permission as close to residential properties as the existing farm. As such, it's considered that the existing use is a bad neighbour and the scheme would remove this element. Officers consider this should be given significant weight, and the development would...
To warn you, members, that was a test, and the lights carry on for a little while, but since it stopped, we know it's not real. So back to you, Charlotte.
And the development would result in a 374% biodiversity net gain, which will be on site. This is a significant improvement of the minimum of 10% required by the Environment Act. As such, it's considered that significant weight should be afforded to this. Officer recommendation is one of approval, subject to the conditions as outlined within the officer report and the completion of a Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. So we have an opportunity to ask questions of clarification, and I'm going to ask the first, which is, in the analysis of the internal roads and the waste service, they said if the internal road was built to adoptable standards, they would be able to access the site with the bin lorry. Can you clarify if there's any indication that the roads will be built to an adoptable standard, or does that come later under reserve matters? Because we're talking about access, aren't we?
Yes, so it's just the access point, which is part of this application and how they will enter the site. So the final layout, which is that the way that the lane looped round, that would be a reserved matter. I understand that the intention is to make that to adoptable standards to allow the 32-ton refuge vehicles to be carried on it. But I think we should be able to secure that some way condition 17
Thank you very much.
refers to, which is landscaping, refers to hard surfing materials, vehicular and pedestrian access and circulation areas. So condition 17 should be able to secure that at reserve matter stage.
That's great. Thank you very much. There may be other questions. So, okay, Councillor Hawkins, I believe you have some questions.
Thank you, Chair. One of my questions actually was going to be on the access, because I think Officer mentioned that there's going to be the front bit. Can we go back to that, please?
Which slide did you?
Sorry, this access plan.
The access plan, thank you.
Yes, that. So the top end is going to be wider than.
It's
Bottom
unfortunate, the plan is very faint, isn't it? But there is a narrowing, roughly, yes, thank you, which is a 30-metre long stretch. Can you show us, Charlotte, the length of that?
So what's the point of that? Why isn't the road the same width
So there
throughout?
are houses on both sides.
That's why I want the officer to clarify, please.
Charlotte, do you want to respond to that?
Does this show it a bit? It's quite far out. A bit better. So number 44 is being retained. So there's not enough space between number 44 and the border with number 56 to have that 6 metre wide access road.
So it reduces to 3.7 for that 30-metre section.
And is highways agreeable to that type of design?
Yeah, I always have no objection.
Okay, thank you. Second question. The height of the building. Now, it's been specifically mentioned 2 stories and 2.5. However, can we clarify what the ridge heights are to be, please? Because we know what developers can be like. They take a bit of Mickey.
Yeah, so on the parameter plan, so for the grey, which is the 2-storey, it's written down as 9.9 metres, and then for the pinky colour, which is 2.5 stories, it's 10.7 metres.
Okay. Well, this is not the time for
Debate,
discussion,
no,
but that is very concerning because that is much higher than the
current buildings?
correct.
Okay. Do you happen to know off the top of your head what the current building height, ridge height is, Charlotte?
So the current building height, did say it before, so the
Is what?
most
Sorry,
sheds,
How many?
the sheds are 4 metres to the ridge, so the standard turkey sheds. The open store shed is 7 metres to the ridge, and then there's some silos, which I'm told are going to 8 metres to the ridge.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And the standard height for the neighbouring buildings? The existing houses, because I think these will be taller than the existing houses, even though they're supposedly 2 stories.
Let's not get too detailed into debate. Rebecca's going to respond.
To know the height of
Rebecca's
those.
going to respond to that.
I wasn't going to respond to that bit. I was going to respond to the previous bit. In terms of the parameter plan, they are maximum heights. So it would be to a maximum height of that height. You know, they could end up lower by the time we get the detailed reserve matters applications in. But for now, the parameter plan is suggesting that in those zones, it could be up to a maximum height of 9.9 and 10.7 metres. Neighbours, I don't know.
Is there any acknowledgement of the height of the neighbouring houses?
Oh, there is not. I do know that some of them, I believe, definitely 60, and I think 58 are bungalows. Number 44 is 2-storey. Number 42 is 2-storey, but I don't know the exact heights.
Thank you. Does that complete your questions, Councillor Hawkins?
I will leave the,
Okay,
if
thank you.
somebody doesn't ask it, then I'll come back, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Sandford and then Councillor Rickson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Section 6.20 of the report, environmental health comments, the Phase 1 environmental assessment has highlighted potential contaminate linkages requiring further investigation. Have you any more details on the nature of those contaminants, whether they're potentially dangerous?
I don't know the details. They did submit a Phase 1 report, which has been reviewed by the contaminated land officer, and that's why they've requested a condition for further surveys to be taken out.
To remember that we're on questions of clarification to the case officer. So succinct, please. Councillor Rickson.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. One is just looking at the affordable rent. There's 11 affordable rent of the 38 dwellings, so that's 28.9% affordable. Is that, and our target is 30. Is that within acceptable tolerances?
Yes, because they can't do the exact percent, so that the housing officer is happy that it's essentially rounded up. Yeah.
And then the second one was just to clarify. This application is outlined with all matters reserved, so except for access. So all of the information we're looking at in terms of the site plan, the design codes, heights, and anything internal is indicative and demonstrating to us that perhaps that 30 dwellings could fit on the site, but it's not something that we're necessarily approving at this point. It is just access. Is that correct?
So we would be approving the parameter plan and the design code.
Okay.
So any reserved matters that come forward would have to match what has previously been said in those documents.
Excellent. Okay, thank you.
That's right, and remember that today we are looking at an outline plan with all matters reserved except for access. So it's really only the access, and as Charlotte says, the plans just give an indication that they could fit 38 houses onto the site. Right, so Councillor Ellington.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether I misunderstood, but the information was given that there would be 12 trips, which I presume to mean journeys, down that access road in the morning and in the evening. Well, with 38 houses and 2 cars per house, I failed to see how we can have 12 trips, but I may have misunderstood what I was being told.
So based on the transport assessment submitted by the applicant, it's estimated there'll be 21 movements in the morning peak hour and 21 movements in the PM peak hour. The 12 trips per day is based on a third-party comment who said at most, at the moment, there's only 12 trips per day.
It's at the moment, so there's going to be considerably more than that when this building is constructed, if it is. Okay, thank you.
There'd be 21 according to the transport assessment, and also the 12 trips per day, and I do note the third party commenter said that was at their peak, is based at the moment, with the farm only running about a quarter of what its capacity could be. It was requested some details from the applicants yesterday, and they confirmed that in the past, when they have run at capacity, which is up to 40,000 turkeys, they at that stage had an additional 15 staff members on top of, I believe it is 3 that they have now.
So it's a bit sort of up in the air, but if you've got 38 houses with 2 cars each, it's going to be considerably more, of whatever figure you take as a pre-development.
So Ellington, I also asked that question because the assessment was given that by the county transport officers that it didn't hit the threshold for the increase in business, but currently at present, given its low level of production, the numbers are very low, and the number of houses could generate, say, 20 or 30 exits in the morning and entrances in the evening, which is considerably more than are generated by the 3 members of staff on site that we saw on the site visit. So my question was, how did it not hit the threshold for the increase? And I don't know if you'd like to respond to that.
Yes, so based on the transport assessment, which is using the TRIX vehicular trip rates, which is the top table, which I checked with Tam, our transport assessment officer, yesterday, is the standard method used nationally to work out potential vehicular movements. So he was happy with these trip rates, and then those trip rates are times by the 38 to get those peak numbers at the bottom here. I've lost my, there it is. The bottom here, which in total in the peak hours be 21 movements in the morning and 21 movements in the PM peak hour.
So if I can just clarify, that is based on the 38 dwellings being on the site. Currently, as Charlotte has said, the peak of the current capacity or the current use of the site is 12 trips per day, but that's with 3 members of staff and only 10,000, up to 10,000 turkeys. At full capacity, which it could operate at, it would be 15 more, so 18 members of staff, and obviously 40,000 turkeys, which generates a lot more food deliveries and transport deliveries and stuff moving to and from the site.
So the point being that whilst it's running at very low capacity at the moment, it has permission for a larger number of vehicle movements, which is what this is being measured against or compared to as an increase over. So, Councillor Eileen Wilson.
Thank you. I think my question might have already been answered. I was wondering about the loss of employment. So do I conclude that there are just 3 members of staff on site all the time, or are there any other employees who are likely to lose their employment?
So as I understand, there are currently 3 members of staff employed to work there, but the loss of employment land is not a planning consideration in this case, because the turkey farm is classed as agricultural. So we considered the loss of agricultural land, but it's not considered employment.
Councillor Richard Williams.
Thank you. That kind of answers one of my questions. I find it very strange that policy E14 doesn't apply, because it clearly is employment land. And I can't see anything in E14 that says it doesn't cover agricultural land. Because we do have a policy on loss of employment. But that would be, so just no clarification on that.
Before you carry on, Councillor Williams, I asked the same question. Where has E14 gone in this? And I was advised that it doesn't engage when you're talking about agricultural land.
Yeah, so, I suppose my question was, why? Because it doesn't specifically say in E14 that it doesn't cover agricultural land.
Did you want to respond to that either, Charlotte?
Yeah, we're just bringing up the wording of E14.
Apologies, I was just checking the actual wording of the policy, and it does refer to loss of employment land to non-employment uses, and then makes reference to employment sites, redevelopment or change of use of existing employment sites. And an employment use class isn't an agricultural use class. The employment use classes are more your what used to be B use classes.
And you're referring to policy E14?
Yes. Sorry, apologies, we're just talking about the loss of employment land to non-employment uses, which is policy E14. So it makes reference...
The question is, why is it not engaged in this?
Because it's not employment land. It's not an employment use, it's an agricultural use.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Richard Williams, that was your question. Do you want to carry on?
Yeah, I had two other points. Although I take the answer to that, therefore, meaning that we're interpreting this in line with use classes, and use classes change. Anyway, all right, I might come back to that. But anyway, my other 2 points were we are being invited to put significant weight on the fact that this is a bad neighbour, but I'd be interested in what the evidence for that is, given that the actual neighbours seem to be objecting to the change of the use. Why are we saying, are we invited to say this is a bad neighbour when the actual neighbours don't seem to think it's a bad neighbour? But anyway, just generally, what is the evidence for that? And secondly, I just want to come back to the point that Councillor Rickson made. Self and custom build is not in the description of the planning permission. So can we be absolutely sure, because again, we're being invited to put weight on self and custom build. Given that self and custom build is not mentioned in the description of this application, can we be sure that when it comes back to reserve matters, they will in fact be obliged to build some custom and self-built houses, given it's not in the description of the development that's being permitted?
Yeah, so in terms of the self and custom build, so on the parameter plan, and I will admit it's quite hard to see from here, there's 2 yellow stars which say self and custom build. So if any reserve matters application does come in, these areas here, this one and this one, will be self and custom build. We would also secure it by way of the Section 106 agreement.
Are you happy with that?
In terms of the bad neighbour, this is taken from the Ocorus report, which talks about the viability of the turkey farm, and it essentially says that typical distances from housing to get Environment Agency odour limits acceptable need to be 300 to 500 metres away. So poultry farms usually have issues with noise and odour and contaminated land. It is noted that the neighbours do not seem to have necessarily an issue with it at the moment, but the turkey farm at present is only running at 10,000 birds. When we went on site last week, there was significantly less than that. And just lost my train of thought. I apologise. And it is considerably classed as a small turkey farm because they can only go up to 40,000 because otherwise they would need a licence which they would be unlikely to be granted to go over 40,000.
Thank you. If I could just come back on one point. I take from that there is no actual evidence that this farm is a bad neighbour, but just on that self and custom build point there, so just clarify, are they going to be obliged
Could
to...
you just slow down a bit, because the echo is confounding.
Are the applicants going to be obliged by planning condition or whatever to bring forward a reserved matters application in accordance with that parameter plan? Will it be specifically secured by condition?
Today, it's part of the things that we're agreeing today, the parameter plan. So
Which condition?
Sorry if I can jump in. There's also a head of term in, it's on page 45, that a minimum of 5% of the market houses will be self/custom build. So that will be a head of term in the section 106. And also we are looking to approve the parameter plan as well as the design code. So as Charlotte explained, I think in answer to a previous question from Councillor Rickson, that any reserve matters application that came forward would have to be in line with those two documents as well. If I can come back just to clarify on the employment land. So employment land relates, when it's classified as employment land, it relates to employment uses. This is an agricultural use rather than what is traditionally used to be B-class uses, which were employment land uses. Otherwise, we could get ourselves in a situation where every piece of agricultural land could be considered employment land if we're going down that route and that train of thought. So that's why the policy refers to loss of employment land for other than non-employment uses, so that we're not looking at the loss of agricultural land, and agricultural land is in a separate policy, which Charlotte has referred to. I'm not sure if that clarified it or made it muddier.
No, thank you. Yep.
Thank you. I can't see any other questions of clarification. Just a couple I wanted to add to that. Bearing in mind, we are only looking at an outline application with matters reserved, all matters reserved except for access. But in the narrative, there is a suggestion that connecting paths, in other words, connecting to surrounding footpath network, might be provided and planned for in the layout. I just wanted to clarify my understanding that we should effectively ignore, because there are no agreements yet with the third-party landowners over which those connecting paths would connect up to the other public rights of way. Can you confirm that, please?
Yes, that is correct. So at present we can't get an agreement to connect to the public footpaths. As such, it should be ignored in any consideration of the balance.
Yeah, so we need to put that to one side.
Sorry, however, let me try and move my microphone, bear with. However, there is the first obligation on page 43 relates to a transport contribution towards widening and lengthening a footpath on station road. There is that element of footpath, but yes, not connections as indicated potentially during the life of the application about connecting to the public footpaths to the east and west of the site.
But that's 2 miles away, isn't it? Which is not related to this site at all. It's a contribution off-site.
Off-site, as well as the footpath that Charlotte indicated on the other plan, which is to the front. You can see where the
footpath on north.
Yes. So the proposed new stretch of footpath on North End, as well as a contribution towards footpath improvements off-site.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And the other one was, I wanted to ask about to what degree we can. There was reference in the report to play, and the fact that there was no obligation to provide an equipped area of play, but they will, because this is a 38 dwellings and there will be children and they need to have somewhere to play, and that it's 1.2 kilometres to the village recreation ground. So there was reference to, unless they used other land in their ownership, in their wider ownership. And I just wondered whether there was any, I wonder, could you just go back to the landscape layout? And again, so in the, it's unfortunate that doesn't show the red line boundary, but I wondered whether there was some space below that curving, which is in the red line. The red line goes down to the field boundary. And I just wondered what, yes, there. I just wondered whether there was some opportunity to request play somewhere on the site in the reserved matters.
So there is no requirement for them to provide a local equipped area of play, the LEAP, because of the size of the development. They are proposing, and this is stated within their design code, which is an approved document, that in this central area there will be a local area of play, a lap of at least 100 square metres.
And in earlier iterations of the plan, when it showed in the applicant's submission how the plan had been developed, that area was indicated as a SUD, and a sustainable drainage pond. And I just wanted to check if you are satisfied at this stage, to the degree that you need to be, that isn't going to be needed for a sustainable drainage system.
So that's a matter to be reserved. So it potentially could need some SUDs occurring in this area, but they could also provide some play at the same time, the details of which will be submitted as part of the reserve matters application.
So the provision so far is the 1,000 square metres.
Yes, and also condition 18 requires details of the informal play area.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Councillor Redrup.
Thank you, Chair. It's just in relation to you bringing up the central area of greenery. Where I live, there's been a problem where some of the green areas have been bought by somebody and then trying to develop on them later, even though they were kind of set up as meaning to be for community. I just wondered if there's any protection on those areas of green to make sure that they remain in perpetuity for those residents.
Good question. Charlotte, can you advise us?
Yes, so we're just looking at condition 17, which is the landscaping. We're just looking at this, and we could potentially add remain in perpetuity.
Yes,
retained
please.
in perpetuity. So condition 17 is regarding the hard and soft landscaping scheme. So at the moment, it talks about the 5 years for the planting of trees. And then
it's
also
18 that talks about informal play.
no, for 17 is the
Okay.
landscaping. I understood the question to be the green areas rather than the play. And then also 19, we can just strengthen that by adding that it remains in perpetuity. So again, that's to regards to the landscape management and maintenance.
The green areas remain green in perpetuity. Yes, I'd be happy for that. Absolutely. Can we leave you to work out some wording for that, please? Thank you. Right, I can't see any other questions of clarification to the case. Oh, to me? Right, sorry, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Dr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. Can we go back to the last slide, the balance, please?
Oh, the planning balance.
The planning balance, yeah. Now, I presume this is why we've got on the refusal side lots of BMB land, which is, what did you call it? Something. BMB. What does the BMB stand
Best
for?
and most versatile agricultural.
Right. Because I thought it was a brownfield site.
Well, precisely.
So I'm just clarifying that So it's not a brownfield site, it's an agricultural, so which is why we have that as loss of pests. Again, whatever it is, BMV. So BMV to me means something else.
Which is why the biodiversity net gain is so great, because a lot of the land is current. Well, actually, to be fair, under those sheds, a lot of the land does not have concrete. It's there's sheds on ground, but it is a loss of agricultural land, not greenbelt. Yes, exactly. Okay, are you happy with that?
That was the question.
Do the planning officers want to clarify my thought process?
Yes, so it does not class as brownfield land as per the definition within the NPPF. It is therefore classed as agricultural land, but yes, it is built on. It's kind of this in between, but we have to consider, because it's agricultural land and under an agricultural use, we have to consider the loss of agricultural land.
So, we've had our questions of clarification, and we now have our registered speakers. So, just to remind you, we have 2 speakers speaking in objection, and that means they get 1.5 minutes each. So, we will hold you to that. Thank you. So, the first is Margaret Lynch. If you'd like to come to the... Oh, right. Aisling Mulvaney, then, is going to come first. And are you... please don't stand up, because we won't... You'll be further away from the... Oh, right, okay. So firstly, you've got 1.5 minutes, and secondly, I will stop you fairly promptly on the 1 minute 30 seconds. So do go ahead, Aisling.
Great, thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to speak. I do wish to strongly object to this planning application. And there's many issues with the application. Some have already been discussed within the clarifying questions. But the access arrangements alone are enough to warrant refusal. The proposed access route is fundamentally unsafe and unsuitable. The lane is narrow, poorly surfaced, and lacks any continuous pedestrian or cycling infrastructure. The application fails to demonstrate how large vehicles, including emergency services, construction lorries, and there is a question mark over the refuse trucks, will safely navigate in and out, and there is no secondary access. Also, just bringing up the trip generation report that was shared, at capacity, and I have lived in that area for a period of time, at capacity, the route in and out of the farm is different to the proposed access as is now. And the assessment that was done, from my interpretation, was done on a Saturday morning. So it's very tricky to compare apples for apples when it's apples and oranges. I do believe the visibility displays are inadequate, and the footway provision is unclear, as already discussed, and the transport statement fails to meet the basic requirements of GG 119 of the Design Manual for Roads and Bridges. The highways officers have already, and emergency services already raised concerns about the adoption and the uncertainty. And I'd also like to highlight a technical issue with regards to the report stating that South Cambridgeshire District Council as the overseeing authority, and that's incorrect, because the responsible body for road safety audits is Cambridge County Council.
Excuse me, your time's up, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you. I object.
Thank you. So, the next speaker, thank you, is Margaret Lynch. Thank you very much.
I'd like to ask if I
could you sit down so we can hear you a bit more easily?
Okay.
You're closer to the microphone there. Thank you, Margaret.
Right.
When you're ready.
Greater Cambridge's report, published this year, shows that we can meet government targets of 5.5 years of housing land available. This means that local plans should inform all planning decisions. This application does not conform to our group village status, nor to our development framework. It runs counter to the principle of a local plan, so we are surprised at the recommendation to approve. We have wished to challenge the planning balance. We've produced an alternative planning balance with expert advice. This shows that the waiting is unsafe. We would like councillors to have the opportunity to read that and to check it. I think this should be for your consideration, and I urge you to delay the order so that you can do so. I'll briefly mention the technical problem with access. Access depends upon a footpath along the frontage of our land. We assert we own this. We are currently taking advice. We understand that approval would depend upon signatures of all landowners under Section 106. As that is unclear, we feel the application should be deferred until clarity can be established on this. As landowners, 45 years in that...
Margaret, I'm sorry, your time is up. Just to clarify, my simple understanding is that matters of land ownership are not considered as part of this committee. That is a civil matter, and we are obliged to look at the application as it stands. I've also had clarification on the site visit, or we believe that the part of the verge that is being proposed for use as a path is in county council ownership, but perhaps, thank you very much for that. Thank you. So if you'd like to turn the microphone off, and if members have any questions, they will be asked of the case officer. Thank you. So, members, do you have any questions based on what the objectors have said to the case officer? Could you just clarify, Charlotte, the narrative that you gave to me about the ownership of the verge outside? And I believe Margaret must be from 42. Yeah, exactly, 42 North End. Could you just clarify that for us, please?
Yeah, so it's explained on page 39 within the table. So as the objector said, they have queried the ownership of the land where the footpath on North End will be established. They have provided myself with a deed which has been made public. The applicants have also looked into land registry documents, but noting that number 42 is not registered. And I've also spoken to the local highways authority in terms of who is the potential owner of the verge north of the ditch. And from what we can establish, we understand that the verge is controlled by the local highways authority. The ditch is likely to be common law riparian ownership. And on this basis, and after checking with Vanessa, we are content that in terms of planning, they have signed this correct certificate of ownership, and notwithstanding that, any land ownership disputes are a civil matter and not for us to arbitrate.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Councillor Hawkins, I believe you had a question.
Thank you, Chair. To say thank you to the objectors for the points they've made. One of the things I wanted to clarify, I think it was the first objector, I'm sorry, I can't remember your name, mentioned that the transport statement does not meet some specific policy. DG something or the other. Just to ask officers if what their view is on that, please.
I'm not sure what policy was referred to. Margaret, the second speaker.
Not first speaker.
Was I know, but Margaret referred to the local plan and not complying with the local plan.
I heard that. This is specifically for the transport, as mentioned by the first public speaker.
point GG119 is what was stated. I don't know.
It's the design manual for roads and bridges. It's cited from that.
Thank you, Ashley. The design manual for roads and bridges, GD119. GG119.
I found the document, it's 15 volumes of standards, advice notes and other documents relating to design, assessment and operation of trunk roads, including motorways in the UK, according to the summary. I would expect that our highways colleagues at County have considered all of the relevant documents and policies that they need to consider when they have provided us with their comments and their any recommendations for conditions and the like.
Thank you. And we are in the habit of believing our highways advisors, county highways officers, they are the experts on transport. So thank you very much for that. Okay. Councillor Khan, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, simply to point of clarification, on page 40 in the first, it's I think there's a misprint on page 40. I just want to make sure that is clarified.
Sorry, page 40, there's a misprint.
With the final sentence in the top thing in the table, it is noted that for the local planning authority to arbitrate. I think you probably intended to say it is not for the local planning authority to arbitrate. I think it's probably important that we note that in the meeting.
So, sorry, I'm not quite sure. Are you in the top? You're on page 40?
On page 40, the top box, the final sentence says it is noted for the local planning authority to arbitrate. I think
oh yes,
it
not,
be, it is
for
not
the local authority to arbitrate. It's not for the local. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Was that the point you wanted to make, Councillor Khan?
Yes. Just for clarity, I wanted to make sure that
yes,
that was.
That's helpful. Thank you very much. Okay. Right. So I think now we move on. The applicant, who also gets 3 minutes. So this is Eleanor Gingell. Is it, or is it Gingell? Gingell. Do you know, that was what my first option was, and I thought, no. So, Ms. Gingell, you have 3 minutes, and we'll time you as precisely as we did our objectors. So,
the proposal before you. Oh, sorry.
Hang on a minute. Have we started the clock?
No, we haven't started the clock yet.
No, exactly. So just give us a moment. Are you ready? Okay. When you're ready.
The proposal before you today represents the accumulation of over 3 years of careful work, collaboration and consultation. Throughout this time, we've incorporated feedback from your officers, an independent design review panel, local residents and a range of stakeholders. Our aim has been to shape a scheme that delivers lasting benefits to the community and leaves a positive legacy. The site is currently a commercial turkey farm. Over the past 60 years, poultry farming practices have evolved with higher environmental and animal welfare standards. To continue to operate viably, the site would require substantial investment involving the demolition and replacement of new sheds, which would be capable of housing up to 70,000 birds. Early pre-application advice, as you've heard today, and that of professional farming experts indicate that such an intensive agricultural redevelopment would unlikely be acceptable due to its impacts and proximity to residential uses. Instead, we've developed a forward-looking alternative, a scheme that reduces overall built footprint on the site by 67%, removes outdated structures, and introduces a carefully considered design to be secured through the code and parameters, which brings about multiple environmental and social benefits. These include reduced water usage and reductions in surface water runout, street tree planting, the creation of shared green spaces and play on the way, a 374% biodiversity net gain, and most importantly, the delivery of market and affordable housing for local people, with 20 of the 38 homes reserved for people with a defined local connection. This is achieved in the following ways. The proposal delivers 15-year affordable homes, largely smaller homes, most of which will directly address Meldreth identified housing needs, which have worsened since the previous housing needs study. Secondly, we've included 5 custom-built homes. Eligible residents must be on the self and custom-built register, again demonstrating a local connection. These will be designed in partnership with future occupants, supporting residents with changing medical care or family needs. Many of you have said to us during the consultation that they struggle to find these homes locally. Together, this means over 50% of those homes are reserved only for those with strong local ties. The remainder will be marketed prior to wider release, again providing further opportunities for local people. In summary, this is a considered, balanced proposal that meets identified housing needs and can deliver genuine social and environmental benefits. We respectfully ask you to grant planning permission in accordance with your officer recommendations so that this project can begin delivering those benefits. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Gingell. Sorry. Right. On the basis of what Ms Gingell has said, do members have any questions of the case officer? No? Okay. Right. So we'll move on to... sorry, Richard. Councillor Richard Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I did have one point. I will admit it wasn't directly related, but I've just pulled up the highways, local highways authority comments, and they do say that the safety audit report does not comply with GG 119. That's in the response of the local highways authority. So I would value some clarification from officers on that, given highways did actually say it.
Sorry, the highways officer.
So the report from the comment from the local highways authority to this application on the planning portal.
Yeah.
If you get that up, it's from the 22nd of May 2025, and scroll right down to the bottom. There's a little section called General Comments, and the first general comment is the Stage 1 Road Safety Audit Report as submitted as part of Appendix J of the Transport Statement does not comply with GG 119 of the Design Manual for Roads and Bridges, as is the requirement in Cambridgeshire County Council, which I think was the point the speaker was making.
Okay, righto.
So I think we would
so that explains where the query came
So I would ask clarification on that point.
It would be helpful if they'd said in what aspect, wouldn't it, given it's 15 volumes.
It would, but...
do officers... Can we just have a moment to... should we have a pause? Do you want to take us offline for 5 minutes or so? Should we have a break, folks? Well, would you like that long? Yeah, 5 minutes will do. So let's have a break until... Oh, right, okay. Internet permitting. Let's reconvene. Let's take us offline. Reconvene at 11:25. Thank you, members. Thank you. Right, so we're looking at land to the south at North End Meldreth, and we're now back online. Do we want to come back to the question that was asked about the issue of the bridges and its regulations? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. We've managed to speak to one of the Highways Authority. He was Transport Assessment Team rather than Development Management Team, who will have done the comments that you can see online. However, as I expected, the DM officer that has done the Highways comments was simply correcting some factual inaccuracies in the statement that was submitted. The report is on section 3, I think it is. It says the report signed off as in line with relevant guidance. The Local Highways Authority, in their correction of the factual inaccuracies, have acknowledged it doesn't confirm with that guidance. However, they haven't objected, and that it was simply pointing out of factual inaccuracy, similarly to the fact that the overseeing organisation in the report is County Council as the Highways Authority, not South Cams. It's not a reason for objecting, it's just correcting something that's factually incorrect. However, they've not objected, but they have requested that conditions, and I think they're conditions 28 and 29, which are on page 60 of your report. So to deal with the issues identified in the road safety audit, they've requested conditions in relation to the access in terms of intervisibility vehicle splays, and also in terms of the site layout, which was condition 29 in relation to the pedestrian footway, the pedestrian crossing point and safety railings. So those are the two conditions that deal with the issues that have been identified in the road safety report. Hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Very reassuring. Now you mention it, on the plan which showed the proposed footpath on North End, it refers to railings, doesn't it? I just wanted to clarify. So there will be the ditch, the verge which will be for a short distance converted into a path, and then there are railings, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Just bringing this back up. I lost my internet.
Thank you very much. Okay. So we now come back to our speakers. So we have two ward councillors who are going to speak, first of which is Councillor Jose Hales. And you have 3 minutes each, and I imagine Councillor Hard, is she online? No. Or not? Okay. Okay, so, right, so you get 3 minutes, Councillor Hales. Are you ready to time?
Before you start the clock, Chair, I'm going to be speaking on behalf of Councillor Hart. She's got a family issue with her mum in hospital, bless her.
Okay, thank you very much. So you're speaking for both of you. Thank you.
So I'll start now then, yeah. Thanks. Thank you very much for letting me speak today. Whilst I accept that housing is needed, I also accept that we have a local plan and we try and protect at all costs. We have a 5-year land supply and we try and protect ourselves from what I would loosely call road developers. This development seems to fall outside of these requirements. The Parish Council stated that they would have preferred more affordable housing, and I think I mentioned an exception site at the site visit. We have 40%, which is in line with our policies anyway. But ultimately, the PC rejected the application. Local residents have rejected the application, and I believe that the pavement issues and who owns the verge outside is also important. Just because highways say it's not theirs, although you've now clarified that that is theirs, there is some matter of controversy there. It does not give the green light for someone else to take it, especially as documentation, however old, exists, stating differently. I do not believe it is safe for our legal team to feel it is okay to apparently run, and I use these words very lightly, roughshod over a resident's apparent ownership of land registry, saying that legally we would be okay if that challenge was made. Access to the site is frankly awful. Just a short piece of road off the main north end doesn't give anybody any kind of leeway for like removal lorries or trucks or any other description like that. And then of course you then got the bottleneck. Councillor Ellington made a very good point with regards to the 21 movements. We know full well that those are a figure which are always exceeded. And I asked the question, I noticed on the transport thing there was no hammerhead that I could see for trucks to turn around on site. So I'm assuming that the lorries go in and then they reverse out onto a main road, which will be good. There's a blind bend at College Farm, the pavement to nowhere. I'm assuming that's got drop curbs both sides to allow people with disability and prams and what have you to traverse the road and get up safely on the other side. We talked about the distance to the shop being 1.2 kilometres because the shop is in the same location as the public open space. I think everybody knows here full well they will be driving to the shop, they'll be driving to the local open space, they'll be driving everywhere because you cannot walk. Services in Meldriff are as near as damn it zero, and I think it's already been mentioned that they will cross across the bridge, which is extremely narrow, into Melbourne to access all those services. So we're just adding to the impact in Melbourne by this application. Last, but nearly not least, to schools. I don't hear anything about schools. Now, I know that could be reserved matters, but these things need to be taken into consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Hales. Your 3 minutes are up. Thank you very much.
Thank you. By the way, Chair,
I want to raise, thank you, Councillor Hales. I want to raise two of the questions that Councillor Hales has alerted, and I'll say both of them now so that the people can respond. The first is I wanted to, Charlotte, if you would respond on the matter of the parish council saying that the affordable housing had not been addressed. The parish council said that the housing needs survey had not been addressed. And secondly, I wanted the legal officer to refer to the point that Councillor Hales made about running roughshod over land ownership. So firstly, Charlotte, to you, please, on the affordable housing, please.
Hi, yes, so the parish did comment that they felt that the housing needs survey by acre had not been consulted. This was then submitted by the applicant after those comments were received, and no more comments were received by the parish. The council's housing officer compared what they were offering in terms of affordable housing to this acre report and is satisfied with the provision of affordable housing.
Thank you very much. And so over to Vanessa regarding...
members, two things. I don't give advice that rides roughshod over anything. And land ownership, and I must be very clear, land ownership is not a matter for your consideration. It is a civil matter. As I understand it, the land registry shows no registered keeper 42, and I have advised that the correct notices have been served.
Thank you very much. Okay, so members, do you have any questions arising from the points made by Councillor Hales for the case officer? Councillor Ellington.
I know we're looking at the overall, but it does seem to me that there is nowhere for the refuse cart to turn round, and all the vehicles that require furniture removal vans, for example, are going to block significant highways and have to back out because there isn't anywhere to turn round. And I just feel that perhaps this design is not appropriate.
It was raised by Councillor Hales. I'm just going to ask Charlotte Spencer to respond, or Rebecca.
It'll be me.
Okay.
If I can come back on that. So this is an outline application with all matters reserved apart from the access. So we are considering the principle of up to 38 dwellings on the site, along with the access into the site, which I think Charlotte had on a previous slide, which is literally that access, the internal layout, the internal road layout, what it will look like, whether there's a turning area, hammerhead for refuse vehicles, any type of vehicles and deliveries is all reserve matters. Site layout is a reserve matters. If I could just address one or two other things that Councillor Hales mentioned, in terms of the parish council requesting more affordable housing or considering a rural exception site for affordable housing, as committee will have heard me say several times in the past, we have to deal with the application that's in front of us. The application that's come before us isn't for a rural exception site for purely affordable housing. However, there is 40% affordable proposed on site, which does meet our policies. And also, I think there was a reference to schools. Members will note on page 43, the local education authorities obviously come back in response to the consultation, and there's 3 different, I'm just going to check. Yeah, there's none over the page. 3 different contributions in relation to preschool, primary and secondary level education. So there's early years, secondary and also SEND educational place contributions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. That's very helpful. Right, so our second speaker has not been able to come and her questions were covered by Councillor Hales. So we move into debate, members. Would anybody like to start us off? I think it might be useful to have the planning balance on the page. Thank you. Dr. Richard Williams, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the speakers and the officer. I am concerned about the access arrangements for the site, and I am particularly concerned about the comments from the local highways authority, because in addition to them noting that GG 119 is not complied with, but not giving us any details about what specifically isn't complied with, in the second paragraph in the same document, they also say that the application is not in accordance with para 115B of the NPPF. And para 115B of the NPF talks about safe and suitable access to the site being achieved for all users, which again is troubling, but also confusing, because it's not really explained what they're talking about. So whilst highways haven't objected, they haven't exactly supported it either, and they've raised some quite serious concerns. So I do have serious doubts about allowing this application to go ahead and ignore the points that are in the highways report.
Can I just ask, we did receive a clarification on the point GG 119 from Rebecca. Did you want to come back on that, Rebecca?
I can only reiterate what I said last time, unfortunately, that those 2 sections are correcting factual inaccuracies in the submitted report. However, highways are not objecting, and in order to deal with the issues that they have identified, which Councillor Williams has referred to, have requested conditions. They haven't advised that those are concerns upon which they would be recommending refusal of the application, however, have recommended conditions to deal with those issues, which I think I outlined as in terms of intervisibility and site layout conditions, which are conditions 28 and 29. I think it was page 60. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, Chair.
Thank you very much.
Just come back very briefly on that. I mean, I had understood, and it would be useful if Rebecca could correct me, I'd understood that we couldn't actually speak to the team that was responsible for this, so the comments we'd got were from a different team when it came to GG 119. But I don't think we had clarification of the second paragraph of the highways comments, which talk about the application not complying with paragraph 115B and 117 of the NPPF. I mean, I don't really see how you can note that something doesn't comply with the NPPF. There is no attempt in this report to say that, and these concerns will be addressed by these conditions. They're just comments hanging at the end of the of the highway submission. And I really would want clarification on exactly what the problems were, and before I was happy to vote this through, I'll be honest. Thank you, but I'll stop there.
To come back, Rebecca.
Yes, so I'm sure as you're aware, if highways are objecting to the application and had serious concerns about safety, of highway safety and of the access arrangements, then that's what their response would have been to the consultation. They have highlighted some concerns. I think the second point that Councillor Williams is referring to is about the safety of cyclists entering and leaving the site. Hence the reason why conditions 28 and 29 relate to the intervisibility displays and the access arrangements. So they have recommended those conditions to deal with the concerns that they have highlighted, but they don't consider highway safety to be a reason for refusal, otherwise they would have advised as such. And yes, I spoke to the Transport Assessment Team, however, he is aware of highway safety issues as well. I couldn't get hold of the Development Management Team. However, they can overlap.
Thank you very much. Councillor Dr. Tim Hawkins, I think you had some queries, or you wanted to speak.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In terms of the highways situation, I hear all parties. The fact that highways have not objected should be given serious weight, because if the shortfalls they identified could not be mitigated, I'm sure they would object. That is highways. So yes, at the end of the day, it's not what we do, but we have to rely on their expertise. In terms of affordable housing, of course, what we have is not an exception site. We would love to have one, but we don't. So the proposal in front of us meets our local plan policies for 40% affordable housing. And in my view, that, again, yes, we have 5-year housing land supply. However, we also make allowance for, I think it's about 10% windfall sites in our local plan. This is a windfall site. Even though I know it's not been mentioned, it is a windfall site. And we do need to get above that 5 years as much as we can. I would rather see 10 years, but I know that would be quite a lot to aim for. My only concern really at this point is the height, the ridge height of the proposed buildings. I know we're supposed to be approving the parameter plan, I think. Now, generally, most houses already built, the ridge height for 2 stories is about 8 meters. Somehow, this is going to 9.5, 10 meters. That's much taller than what is already existing as houses in the area. So I definitely don't like that. I don't want to see that. I would rather the ridge heights were closer to what we currently have in the buildings in the area. That is my main concern at this point in time.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. I have some sympathy with that. Can we, Rebecca, are we in a position to ask the applicant to, because as we know, this is an illustrative plan, it's not as that's, but the parameter plans refer to story height, not actual height. So can we ask them to reflect the neighbouring properties in their ridge heights?
So if I can come back on that, apologies, I was just talking to Charlotte about it. So we do have the parameter plan, which we were anticipating to condition, as same with the design code, so that we ensure that layout and ensure the self-build, etc., and ensure the heights at 2 and 2.5 stories. However, if members were minded, we could word a condition that was along the lines of, notwithstanding the details set out on the parameter plan, maximum heights for 2-storey properties should be 8 metres, I'm looking at Councillor Hawkins, 8 metres for 2 storeys, 10 metres for 2.5.
Sorry, 8 metres for I mean, that's what normal houses are. And
So-
if it's going to be 2.5, it shouldn't be more than 10.
Yeah,
Max.
Notwithstanding what's noted on the parameter plans, because it is noted as a maximum height of 9 point something
Yeah,
and
you
10 point
said,
something for 2 and 2.5 storeys.
You said 9.9 and for 2-storey and 10.7 for 2.5.
Yeah, so if members were concerned about the overall height, we could word a condition that would be, like I say, notwithstanding the approved parameter plan, 2-storey properties should be no higher than 8 metres, 2.5 storeys no higher than 10.
So it's just, I know in the past we've had something, I know, not far from me at 8.2, and it was like, that's way too tall compared to normal,
And
two-storey
indeed,
houses.
I have had the same in my own village, which it would have been much nicer if it had been a bit shorter. So, yes, I think, can I take an indication of whether members would like that kind of condition to be included? I would agree with that. Does anybody object to that? No? Great. Lovely. So, I would also, sorry, any other members wishing to? Councillor Martin Khan.
I was only going to comment on this. I'm assuming we're on a debate at the moment, a discussion.
We are in debate, yeah.
So I was going to say that generally I'm sympathetic to the arguments in favour.
Do you want to come a bit closer to your
Sorry,
microphone?
sympathetic to the arguments in favour. I can see that this will be an improvement from the existing situation. I think we tend to underestimate the impact, whatever the local residents say, of the noise from a turkey farm. I lived for 7 years next to a chicken farm, and it causes problems. Intermittent, but serious, you notice it. So I can see why the advice is to have quite a large margin of distance between such farms and residential developments. And so I do see this as an improvement, and I think that's for me, it's quite a strong argument in favour of the proposal. My main concern is the fact that it's some way away from the centre of the village, and the road, apparently, I wasn't able to attend the site visit, but the road is narrow and winding, and perhaps this will increase more people moving along that road. But there are existing houses along there. There is existing people moving. People do need to be careful, and the highways are not objecting. And as commented, if we don't have the highway support, I don't see that that's a reason to refuse. So generally, I'm tending towards supporting this application.
And Councillor Khan, for your information, those of us who attended the site visit saw, and indeed you can see it on Google imagery, that there is a footpath on the other side, on the north side of North End, which goes into the village. And so the connection that the application is proposing enables a safe crossing to that footpath. Okay, I wanted to, and I'll ask Vanessa if I can ask this. I wanted to query whether we could ask for an informative, because whilst this is about connecting footpaths, I appreciate the land ownership is in various different ownerships, but I wondered whether whether we could ask them to continue to work with the relevant landowners to try to seek the connecting footpaths that they are saying that they want to provide. So yes, because developments like this, it's quite a lot of houses, and it would be good if they connected to the local footpaths, because that would encourage walking and, use of the countryside. And also, it does provide, not an ideal, but it does provide a footpath link to Melbourne, whereas where there are some more services. But it would be a nice route, so can we do that?
So we could ask for an informative that the applicant work with local landowners to discuss the possibility of those landowners agreeing to enter into what's known as a permissive path agreement. But we cannot insist on it, that they enter into it, and we can't guarantee that it would come forward. But it's an informative we could add.
Yeah, I would like that if members think that's a reasonable suggestion. No objections? Anybody object to that? Okay, so I'd like to add that if we were minded to approve this as an informative. So, anybody else wish to speak? So, Councillor Rickson.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just was really echoing some of the points raised by fellow councillors, that I feel that it is kind of on the edge of a village. It's not doesn't come across as that particularly central in terms of access. I mean, this is unusual for me. I haven't seen an application where there's, you know, a significant number of dwellings, or 38 dwellings, that are accessed via a road that narrows. So wouldn't usually argue for more roads and you know, cars to triumph in design, but it does strike me in this would it be classed as rural location or semi-rural? You know, that we're designing in something that already is, you know, there is a restriction. It feels like it's a problem that's being created with that restricted access. Yeah, I think I'll leave it at those 2 points at the moment. I'm not exactly sure where it sits on them.
Thank you very much. There's something else I was going to ask. Right, anybody else wish to comment? I think yes, I know what it was. Thank you. It was about the restricted access. On the drawings for the access, perhaps you could put them up again, Charlotte. Those of us who are on the site visit, from the road, the new proposed access goes to the left of the Black's wood-clad newly renovated number 44. On this drawing, that is to the right of that building, and it goes down between that building, through its garden, and alongside the property, which is number 56. And Charlotte, could you just show us again with your pointer the point at which it narrows to 3 meters? That's it. Okay. So it's wide at the front, and then it narrows. Now, if you see the signs that are proposed, it's not very obvious, but the give way is indicated for people coming out of the site. In other words, the people coming out of the site are required to give way, and the people coming into the site have right of way. Now, there was a thought in my head that actually it might, and the purpose for that was to avoid queuing on the North End Road. There is also a raised table on this 30-metre section. It's quite a long section. And so what I just wanted to clarify was whether there is a refuge for people waiting to go over that narrow section as cars are coming down. And it's really quite difficult to see on that diagram, but Charlotte, can you advise us whether there is actually somewhere where somebody who's wanting to come out of the site can wait safely while the car coming into the site goes past them? I'm not sure where that is.
So that would be further back, and then we're kind of going into the territory of the reserved matters of the layout.
So we are only looking at the access part.
Yes.
But this is the access plan.
Yes, so here it comes back out to 6 metres. So it changes here.
Yeah, but the point, do you see the bulge is on the right-hand side of the road? Whereas actually the people waiting are going to be on the left-hand side of the road. And I just thought, was there any suggestions really, in order to slow people down coming into the site, that the restriction ought to be for those coming in rather than those going out. And I've asked Charlotte that question. Did you want to respond on that?
Yes, I checked with the Highways Development Management Officer, and it's something that I think they advised when the applicants sought their pre-app advice, and it's to stop potential queuing traffic on North End, which is a public highway. When we get to 6 metres, that's enough width for 2 cars to pass safely. So a car exiting, notwithstanding that the layout could change and the road could change past here, further down,
yes,
a car could wait safely for the other car to come through.
So on the inbound side, the left-hand side of the road is straight, so they will carry on over the raised table, and then they will have to bear left past any waiting car.
The cars, as long as the narrow section is free, the cars would be waiting this side.
Yes, and the road bulges out on the east side, doesn't it? So the cars coming down the road would have to bear to the left.
I think if I can try and
help us with
clarify
that?
in simple
I can't
terms,
really see the diagram.
if you're driving down the road as you come in, it's a two-way width.
Yeah.
It then narrows essentially to just more than a single lane. So as you're coming in, you then go down the single lane element and then back onto the two lane width again.
You'd have to go to the left side because the car in front of you is on the single lane coming out.
But you've come in from the left side as well.
Not quite. Anyway, okay.
Actually, no, it's driving straight on. Sorry, I couldn't see.
It's straight.
It's straight down, and then you back out on. Yeah. It's as requested by the highways team.
Yeah, exactly. So all of that gave me some concern, to do with whether you wanted to slow people down. But there is a raised table which should have the effect of slowing people down, so they're not coming racing into this development at great speed. So whilst I had some early concerns about that, I am relatively satisfied that that is being dealt with. Okay, so there's some other questions. Councillor Redrup first, and then Councillor Rixon.
Sorry, I was rubbing my head, but it's fine. I'm happy to speak. I just want to say that, I also shared some of the concerns about the accessibility, but we have heard that highways are happy with that. It is sort of pleasing to see something come forward with the full 40% affordable housing. And I also note that in this one we've got one social rent housing, which I've never seen come forward at planning committee before, and I know that's something our housing team have been desperately wanting to see happen. So I think it is worth raising that as a benefit of this scheme. So to me, I see it as it's the harm of having the extra housing, the 38 above the allotted amount for a group village versus the benefits, which we've heard are the residential instead of the turkey farm, although we've also heard that the neighbours aren't so worried about that, the 40% affordable, including the one social rent, the biodiversity net gain, and the self-custom build that we do need to give weight to, because we've heard many times in committee about how that is something that's given weight by the planning inspectorate. And then we've also seen in our papers that there are multiple Section 106 contributions to try and mitigate the harm of having I see it as the harm of having the extra houses. So I guess at the moment I'm leaning towards approval, but still willing to listen to other comments if there are anything that comes up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rixon.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if officers could clarify about I think there was discussion in the presentation earlier on about whether the road will be adopted by county highways, or is that correct, or it will be completely a private road on site?
Yeah, so the road will not be adopted. That's because the narrowing, the local highways authority won't adopt that because of the narrowing. But in terms of what we're talking about in terms of waste, the main road could be built to adoptable standards, with the exception to that narrowing, to be able to carry the weight of the refuse vehicles. So even though it will be a private road, the refuse vehicles and other vehicles will be able to access it.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Ariel Khan.
So I've never lived next to a poultry farm, so I cannot comment on whether living next to one would really constitute such a miserable experience as has been reported. But at least in my view, there are many residents who do not feel that way. So at least in terms of that reason for approval, I hesitate to put that much weight behind it, as it seems some residents don't. Otherwise, however, the provision of housing is very welcome. We're always happy to see more houses, and especially the custom built and affordable housing, as other councillors have mentioned, is very welcome, especially close to 40%, which is very nice. And of course, we cannot forget the biodiversity net gain, which is very significant in this application, which has been noticed as a significant reason for approval, compared to the site being only very barely outside the development framework, which, as noted in the report, would not really constitute a particularly unsustainable location. So it seems to me that it's difficult to grant the reasons for refusal more weight than the reasons for approval. So I think I would at least be minded to approve of the application, despite not thinking that the turkey farm is that bad a neighbour.
Thank you. Councillor Ellington.
Thank you. If the road is not to be adopted, does this not place additional expense on the homeowners in that the management and repair of the road will have to be undertaken by a management company, presumably? And I think that has an effect on the 40% affordable housing. And I have experience of roads that are looking even worse than our local roads, but still, I think it is an issue that needs to be highlighted.
Thank you. Are you also going to ask about the roads? Because I wanted to ask officers for clarity. Do you want to ask your question now then?
Yeah, I was just going to ask a question for clarification, because I've got a bit confused as we've gone on about what we're actually approving here, because is it literally just the access? So nothing about the internal layout of the roads that we've been talking about we can comment on at all? Or are we saying that actually it's not just the access we're approving here, we're approving at least part of the road layout?
Shall we ask?
Yeah.
How far does the access extend?
So we have indicative site layouts and we have indicative landscape plans. However, the application is an outline application with all matters reserved except for access. So therefore it's the site access plan that Charlotte's got on screen now, and then the red line plan for up to 38 dwellings. However, as part of it, we are recommending the parameter plan and the design code are also approved, because the parameter plan sets out areas for self-build, heights, etc.
Thank you.
So that would mean any reserve matters applications that come forward, as well as the conditions that are in the report, the reserve matters applications that come forward in relation to site layout, etc., have to adhere to the parameter plan.
So going back to the access plan, that is, so Charlotte, would you be so kind, yep, that one, not that one, would you be so kind as to zoom in so we can actually see what is causing the constriction that causes this 30-metre stretch to be only 3 metres wide. Is it possible to do that?
Sorry, I can't because this is PowerPoint, but let me just try and bring up the separate plan. I'll just have to unshare and reshare.
That would be great, thank you. And while we're waiting for that, this plan would be one of the plans, Rebecca, this plan would be one of the ones that we would be approving if the planning committee were minded to approve this. Okay. I've got Councillor Wilson and Councillor Ariel Khan also wishing to speak. Yes, that's helpful. So the thing that's causing the restriction on the left side of the diagram, which is west, is the house. I think it's actually 44, isn't it? Not 54. And the thing that's causing the restriction on the right-hand side is the boundary of number 56. Okay, so just to be clear, the gap on the right-hand side, is that as it were grass verge down the right-hand side? I mean, is that effectively going to be unmade up?
Down the right-hand side, yeah.
Yep.
Yes, I don't believe that's the pavement runs along the right-hand side as it passes 44. Look at this, and then just crossing.
So there is actually a pavement there.
Goes up to the left. No, not on the right-hand side, as we're looking at that, not on the western side. The pavement is on the left eastern side, which then joins the pavement, which they're going to.
Sorry, the pavement is on the west side, did you say?
Yes.
It looks as if there's a bigger gap on the east side. Because actually that was one of the other things I wanted to ask about internal pavements. But
Sorry, I didn't have my mic on there. I apologise.
I think the pavement's on the east side.
Yeah, so the path is on the right-hand side.
Yep.
As it passes number 44, then they cross to go to the left-hand side.
Do you mean?
And then they come round.
Sorry.
Because if there was a path on the right-hand side, that wouldn't lead to anything because there's no footpath on the southern side of North End. They are installing a footpath on the southern side of North End to the west.
Okay. Will the path on the southern side of North End connect to which side of this?
So as we're looking at the diagram on screen at the minute, if you imagine you're coming up from the bottom of the screen as a pedestrian, if I go with left and right, it might be easier.
It's east and west.
Or whichever you prefer. So on the right-hand side, you will walk along the boundary with number 56. There's a footpath there.
Yeah.
Footpath there. Once you pass, I think it's 44, not 54.
Yes.
You can see there's a slight dotted line. You then cross over to the left-hand side of the road. The footpath then carries on up to what will be the new footpath on North End, which passes beyond the existing agricultural access and junction that's there, that will then align with the footpath that's on the north side of North End at present.
Gotcha.
So you go
that
up,
was why.
over,
it's because
up
the
and on.
footpath starts on the east side, crosses over at the beginning of the raised table to the west side, and then joins with the pavement to the north. Great, lovely, thank you very much. Right, we had Councillor Wilson and then Councillor Ariel Khan.
Thank you. When we were speaking earlier about the layout, we discussed the self-build. So I just want clarification, really. If the internal layout of the roads can be changed at the reserved matter stage, can the actual numbers of houses and the type of homes be changed as well? So could we lose
Different
those self-build?
I think Rebecca will explain.
So there's a head of term, apologies, let me just find the page number. In the report, which is on page 45, which relates to the provision of self and or custom build properties. And if the parameter plan is approved, there is yellow stars, I think Charlotte advised, indicating the area on the site that is being approved for suitable for the house self and custom build. So yes, it's not in the description of development, but it is head of term in the 106, and if approved, is also on the parameter plan, which we are recommending approving.
And the other side of that question, I wanted to clarify that it's my understanding that if we approve the access today, which is one of the things we are asked to approve, that will not change. That was why I was asking the question about the footpath, because I wanted to be sure that there was a footpath that would take people safely through that 33-metre wide section. Would you want to come back on that, Rebecca?
Yes, so the access plan is also one of the recommended plans that's approved as part of the application, and the outline is all matters reserved save for access, so that plan is also one that would be approved. If they wanted to vary it, then they would need to come back in with a different application.
So the access plan ends at that southern end of the drawing that we just
Yes.
interrogated. Thank you very much.
The other internal roads are part of site layout rather than access.
Lovely, thank you very much. And Councillor Ariel Khan, and then Councillor Martin Khan.
Sorry for coming back to this again. But in terms of the access, which we've got plans for and we will be approving, it seems to me that, as we've discussed before, Highways is perfectly happy with it, or at least mostly happy that it's not something that cannot be resolved with conditions. Correct. So at least to me it seems that even if I have some reservations about the location of the bumps, as it were, generally it seems to me to be okay with Highways. It's difficult to say that it's unacceptable.
Exactly. If I may clarify that point, given that Highways have said that the things that they had reservations about, they wanted conditions, which were 28 and 29, and they have not objected. So I think we'd be on very shaky grounds if we then said we wanted to refuse it on highway access grounds.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. So Councillor Martin Carr.
It's just a simple thought. I mean, it is a narrow and winding road, even if it's got a footpath. People in the new development, if it were to get the go-ahead, would be forced to cross the road to go to the pavement. So there will be an increase of people crossing the road, which is a concern, particularly on the winding road. I wondered whether it would be something to ask for a pedestrian sign to be put at either on the road, to be paid for in the 106, to warn people that there may be people crossing the road. Just a thought. And I don't know what planning officers feel about that as a requirement.
Well, since the give way signs are part of the access plan, can we ask for that to be indicated, or even that there might be children, or?
I think we'd have to, because it's not part of any of the plans that we would be looking to approve, if minded to approve today, it would need to be something that's put into the section 106. Looking at Vanessa to see if that's possible. If I could just note that it is a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit along that road, and people have slowed down to turn into the road.
You mean on
North end
is 20 miles an hour, isn't it? Yes, that's true.
So it's 20 miles an hour, you've slowed to turn into the road as well.
Could we ask for such a sign indicating that there will be pedestrians as an informative?
I could, yes, but again, same as Vanessa said previously, you can't guarantee it would. We couldn't make them do it if it's an informative. We could say that they should consider putting a sign up.
Is there any way it could be incorporated into a condition?
I would be happy with an informative that they consult with the highway authority, because the highway authority may have comments to make on signs.
possibly give way to liability. So informative that they consult with highway on pedestrian safety signage, but we cannot guarantee that.
Rickson?
So, thank you, Chair. So, yeah, just to argue the counter of, I mean, I think Vanessa has stated can't necessarily ask for a sign. I think it would be over-prescriptive to be asking for a sign informing people there that pedestrians could be crossing within the village environment. I mean, it's just, you'd expect that people to be aware of pedestrians, then not necessarily needing a sign to inform them of that. So I think it's a
So you don't support that?
No, I think it's a bit of a daft idea.
Right, I'm not sure I do really, but okay. Right, I can't see anybody else wishing to speak. Oh, Councillor Dr. Timmy Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. Nothing hopefully controversial. We said a lot about the access. Now, what I can say is I have something similar in my village, and it works. Where they come up one side, cross on the table, and then go on the other side, and it works.
Yes.
So, hopefully that gives, well, at least that gives me some, comfort that it's acceptable. But the fact, again, that highways have requested this, they've looked at it, and they're okay with it, goes. Now, one thing that we haven't said, and I just want to make the point, is it's not usual for us to find an application for 30-something houses that has a parameter plan and a design code that's been put together. This tends to be for bigger developments. So it's just to say, well done for doing that to the applicants. And it does go a long way to say that, yes, there's constraints, there's issues, it's outside the framework and all that. But it shows I'm not sure what the word is I'm looking for, a desire to make sure that the development actually is a good one going forward, meets local needs, which they've emphasized, but is a good legacy for them going forward. Doing this at an outline stage for this size, they've gone a long way to do this. So, kudos to them. And frankly, I see the concerns about GP provision, but NHS have asked for, S106, so has education, etc., etc. So my feeling is there's no reason for us to object to this. And Chair, if you don't mind, I would like to move the motion.
No, wait a minute. I need to speak too. Thank you. I'm being very courteous and letting everybody else speak first. But yes, I agree. We need to come to a decision. Will you put your hand up?
No.
Okay. Right. I just want to ask our legal advisor one thing. Just a few minutes while the legal officer just seeks advice from planning development officer. Thank you for that. You will understand why I'm asking this. Rebecca, thank you. When you're ready, members. I wanted to ask, is there any way that we can condition that the access aspects as provided in that drawing that we had are built to adoptable standards? Because if you remember, the waste service said if it was built to adoptable standards, we will take our lorry down there. And I want to be sure that it is going to be, if we can, that it is built to adoptable standards, not least for the reasons that Councillor Ellington made, that access road at least should be built to adoptable standards. Although that's a different, Councillor Ellington was making a different point, but can we do that?
Yes, I think we can add a compliance condition about the access, but also the main road through or within the site, whatever route it takes, to be to adoptable standard, but not necessarily the little individual offshoots off that road. But if, assuming it's in line with what we've seen on the indicative, it was the grey route. There are a couple of yellow offshoots, but I could word a compliance condition about the access and the main route through the site.
That would be to
adoptable highway standards.
To ensure that the refuse lorries could go down there such that then people wouldn't have to bring their bins all the way out to the front the road where there's nowhere to store them anyway. So that would be really important. And so if we can add that in. So I'd just like to make my summation before we come to Rebecca's planning summation. So my feeling is that whilst this site is outside the development framework and it's quite a long way from the centre of the village, there are other houses along here and it's quite an occupied area. So, and there is a footpath on the north side of North End that goes all the way into the village of Meldreth, or into the centre. So my feeling is this is a good use of land. The owner of the site here has other turkey farms elsewhere where the people who are employed there, he said in his report that they could be engaged. We need more housing in South Cambridgeshire, and we've got an offer of affordable housing and self-build and custom build. All of these things we need in our local plan and in our planning arrangements. We've got an offer of 40% affordable, which is excellent, and we've got an access to it that the county highways are satisfied will be safe. So I think that's all important. This will provide much needed housing, and I think my feeling is that there is no reason to object to this application. And I'm very pleased that we're making provisions in the informatives about the footpath and in the compliance condition around the road that will make this accessible for the bin lorries. So we're about to consider that parameter plan and the access, but with all other matters reserved. So, Rebecca, did you want to make your summary for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. So the officer recommendation is to approve, subject to the conditions set out in the report, with slight amendments, I understand, to conditions 17 and 19 to remain in perpetuity, with the addition of a condition notwithstanding the parameter plan to restrict the heights of 2-storey properties to 8 metres and 2.5-storey properties to 10 metres, and the addition of a compliance condition regarding the construction of the access and the main route through the site to the specified highway standards, together with additions of informatives relating to working with landowners about a permissive path agreement to connect to the existing public rights of way, and about consulting with the Highways Authority about signage relating to pedestrian safety. In addition to the satisfactory completion of a Section 106 agreement, which is set out on paragraph 24.5 of the report on pages 43 and 44.
Thank you very
Chair.
much indeed,
Free.
Rebecca. Great. Okay, so I would like to propose approval of that recommendation. Would we like to second that? Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins, thank you. So, members, let's take a vote on that. I think that's all of us, isn't it? So that's 9 in favour and 1 objection. So with that, motion is carried. Thank you very much to the people who have attended today and given their views. We really appreciate hearing from you. Sometimes the decisions we made are not those which you would have wished for, but you can hear we've really considered everything that you've said very carefully, and we've quizzed the officers on a number of things. So thank you very much indeed, members. That is approved. Can I suggest we have a 5-minute break before we move on to the next item? So it's 12:38. If we can come back at 12:45.
now live.
Lovely, thank you very much. So we return to the Planning Committee at agenda item 7. Six. Oh, number 6, yes, quite. The compliance report. Let's go with that. Members, we received this as a separate item, and I would remind you that we do not ask questions about individual sites. We can ask questions of principle and clarification. And I have a question. Okay. Oh, and there's Chris Braybrook online. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, Chair.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask about the general principle of neighbours having to identify themselves when making reporting concerns about neighbouring properties. And I just wanted to check with you what provisions there are to, because obviously if you're next door to a problematic neighbour and you want to make an enforcement report or a compliance report, what protections are there for the person making the report in that situation, Chris?
So in terms of actually complaining to the council, if you provide the details, generally speaking, we do not obviously give out details of our complainants. Under freedom of information requests for active compliance matters, then there is a section in the environmental regulations that allow us to decline those requests for investigations like that. In terms of those that wish to be anonymous, we've had conversations around this before, and our website points customers basically to either contact their local parish council or their elected member to bring matters to the attention of the compliance team on their behalf. In terms of when we issue notices where situations can arise where there is intimidation of neighbours, that is more difficult to deal with. Obviously, we don't give out details, but in certain circumstances, unfortunately, it will be obvious who may have complained. There's very little we can do where complainants are intimidated or contacted by those that we investigate. However, we would always obviously recommend those persons to keep a diary of what happens and contact the police, because obviously threatening behaviour is not tolerated really. So it is a difficult balancing act in terms of this, and it can be difficult to keep complainants completely anonymous.
I really appreciate that, and I think it's a really helpful reminder that our website does advise people wishing to make a complaint but being nervous about making it themselves to raise it with the parish council or the local member who can raise it on their behalf. Thanks for reminding us of that. I'm sorry I jumped in with that, but did you want to present your report? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so my report is based on the statistical data from the beginning of March, which is where the last report ended, through to the end of June. So on the 30th of June, we had, as a service, 453 open compliance cases for both authorities. And of those, 295 identifiable open cases in South Cambridgeshire. Since the 1st of January, we've received, up until the end of June, 367 referrals, which is kind of, for half a year, bringing us out to probably around 700 for the year, which would, looks like we're on course for about the same amount of new referrals as last year. There's some updates to delivery before I get into the statistics of caseloads. We've got some changes with staffing, which I'd just like to bring to the attention of the committee. Alistair Funge was on a secondment, 1-year secondment to a principal role. that secondment has now finished, and he's returned to his substantive post as Senior Compliance Officer. We've had Tanya Much, who's joined the compliance team, and she's joined us on a 1-year secondment as a Senior Planning Compliance Officer, and this is for some project work which be able to update the committee on in the future. And Oscar Langford, our apprentice, is now doing some development management planning casework. So he's dealing with planning applications, and that's to obviously assist him in his education and apprenticeship. So he'll be doing less compliance work for us, but he remains part of the compliance team. Obviously, you've already reminded members, but if anyone wants a specific update on a specific case, please do get in contact with me or the area, the principals or the case officers, and we'll come back to you. If you've got any issues regarding communications, please let me know, and I will come back to you with the answers. There's further service update just at the bottom of my report. At the last committee that I attended, I was asked to provide statistical data for intervals of time for how long cases have been open. So that's now been included in the report, and we're obviously now working towards and have detailed information for key performance indicators such as the amount of time taken by officers to attend the site, and we've managed to adapt those reports to give you better and more accurate data in the report, which I'll cover shortly. We've continued to review the open files with a view to determining the next course of action, whatever that might be. So we have been able to review open files, close certain ones where it's not expedient, or move forward to further action as well. And then obviously we've been able to close files where remedial works have been completed, or we've checked that retrospective planning permission has been granted. So since the last report to committee, in terms of the amount of open files we've closed around 100 files from the 550 open cases we had in March. I said we were at about 453. It's actually about 440 as of today. So there's some changes since I composed the report, and we continue to work on new case files to ensure they're reviewed in a timely manner, whilst we're still obviously undertaking the review with the older ones. So there's been quite a bit of work in terms of the case files and progressing them. Appendix 1, there is some details about notices that have been issued, and I've included the February ones just to remind members of the notices we issued then, and obviously we've got the new notices we've issued since then within South Cambridgeshire. In terms of the Appendix 2 and the caseload statistics, as you see, we've got the open case files there, and we can see that obviously, they have reduced in South Cambridgeshire. There has been a slight increase in open files, even though we've been closing them. It's just that in recent months there's been more new files coming in for South Cambridgeshire rather than across the board. So in terms of new compliance referrals, as members will see, we've had since the beginning of the year 3 priority A's, 28 priority B's, and 336 priority C's, and there's a reminder in the report as to what those priorities mean. In the last committee meeting, I was asked to perhaps break down details of officer workloads as well, so the committee had an understanding of kind of where individual officers sit. I've anonymised the report to some extent, but there is now a breakdown of the open files which each officer has within the service. I've also provided details, like I say, in terms of cases that are less than 6 months old. So we've got 114 within South Cambridgeshire, and more than 6 months old, we have 181 open cases. And then breaking that down, cases older than 12 months, 176, 18 months, 122, 24 months, 65, and older than 36 months, 29. In terms of those cases that we have open that are older, these are ones that are historical, either have appeals or other enforcement matters that need dealing with. And we've tried to, like I say, ensure that the files that we have open are the most relevant ones that we need to act upon. During the period 1st of March to 30th of June, the service has closed 352 files and 225 of those are in South Cambridgeshire, and there is a breakdown for the reasons of the closures across the service. And cases closed by priority: 8 priority A's, 28 priority B's and 316 priority C's. I've got updates on the acknowledgements, so that's a period of time from a customer submitting a complaint to us, putting that on the system and them getting the acknowledgement of their complaint. So we've had no new priority A's come in, but priority B's and priority C's just a smidgen over 1 day in each circumstance. And then the average time to the site visit from allocation. So obviously the priority A is 1 working day, priority B is 10 working days, and priority C is 20 working days for a visit. As we can see, priority A is 1.33 days, so 100% on target. Priority B, 7.33 days, that's 80%. And then priority C, 5.06 days, 96.5% of sites visited on target. And that is the end of my report. Any questions?
Chris, I'd like to thank you very much for your report and for the added detail that you've put in, and I appreciate that will be taking you more time to produce, so thank you very much indeed. I think that gives us a very clear understanding of the workload that you're dealing with and how you're handling it. And also I just wanted to thank you that the number of cases, you are whittling away at the number of open cases, and I wanted to thank you for that because I appreciate it's a lot of time and some of the cases are undoubtedly probably quite complex and quite intransigent. So thank you very much. So members, Councillor Martin Khan, you have a question.
No, you certainly can't ask about specific cases, but we thought, so there was an appeal allowed with award of costs. So I wonder if there's any general points that you might like to make. Is that allowable?
I think Rebecca Smith has said she will cover that under her report, if that's okay.
Okay.
Councillor Khan. And oh, Councillor Richard Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to thank the officer for the report, which I thought was very comprehensive, very detailed and very interesting. So thank you for that. My question is actually a procedural question for you, Chair. You said right at the start that we were not allowed to ask questions about individual cases. Now, I understand why it might not be wise to do that, but I am uncomfortable with a ruling that we are not allowed to ask questions. Given that there are individual cases in this report, it is a matter of public record what they are. I'm just a bit uncomfortable with the idea that we are not allowed to ask questions about individual cases.
If I can come back on that, the request was not in terms of specifics about the individual cases, because we don't want to prejudice any action potentially we may be taking on a case. So in terms of the, in the report, there is reference to notices that have been served, so which is, as you quite rightly pointed out, a public record that we have served those notices. However, it was a request, if you have questions about specific cases, if you can direct them to Chris outside of this meeting, rather than potentially prejudicing our case by asking them within the meeting.
I'm sorry to be difficult, but I would welcome some advice from the legal officer. I completely accept the point that it might not be wise to do it. I'm not arguing, but I just think saying to councillors you can't ask questions about things.
Right, I just wanted to explain that perhaps my wording wasn't quite precise enough, but it's my understanding that the officer has said he's happy to accept queries personally, but he cannot do that in the meeting. So, Vanessa.
So, yes,
it's rather like any set of proceedings. We don't want to jeopardise any actions being taken by the council, and officers simply won't answer. They won't answer questions that could jeopardise it. So it's better to ask outside of this public forum. If they are to be asked, then we would take this, it would have to go into almost pink papers.
Confidential session.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to come back again, but that wasn't the case up until about 2 meetings ago. And you can ask questions that wouldn't prejudice a case. I'm not saying please give me your case management plan and what your next actions are. There are lots of questions you can ask that wouldn't prejudice a case. And it wasn't previously the case that we were told we weren't allowed to ask questions. We've sat here and discussed lots of planning enforcement cases. I don't know what's changed, why we suddenly got this new rule.
So as far as I'm aware, since I took over as delivery manager, we haven't discussed specifics of cases. There's been general questions, and Chris has taken away questions about a specific case. So where members have asked questions about a specific case, I've taken them away, and when Chris hasn't been here and Chris has come back to members, I'm not aware, and if you've got video recording of us answering it up to 2 meetings ago, then I'm misremembering. But as far as I'm aware, we've consistently for the last 2 years said if you've got specific questions on specific sites or cases, please send them to Chris directly.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Councillor Martin Khan.
I just wondered whether there was a difference here between appeal decisions which have been made and applications. Are you happy to answer on appeal decisions which have been made, or,
yes,
or beyond the point at which judicial review might take place? I suppose that's also in consideration.
My comment was regarding the compliance report. The appeals are a different matter, so Rebecca, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, so we're currently looking at item 6, which is the compliance report. Item 7 is the appeals report. Okay. So yes, I've answered questions or taken the questions away in relation to the appeals report. But as far as I can recall, we've always taken questions away and asked members to come separately to Chris in relation to the compliance report matters.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chris. And I think we wish you well, because we appreciate the work you're doing. It's not easy, and it's complex, and it's very time consuming. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right, so we'll move on. If that's all the questions, we can move on to item 7, which is decisions notified by the Secretary of State. Did anybody have any questions on that?
I can answer the question that Martin's already raised,
Yes,
if that's
okay.
helpful.
Can you just remind us of the question, please?
So running through the decisions that we've got thus far, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 appeal decisions that we received in the last month, 6 of which the appeals were dismissed. There was one which is a link of 3 appeals, but we've had the decision on one of those appeals thus far, which relates to the change of use of land at south of the Sheer Fen Boat Club on 20 Pence Road, where the appeal was allowed, and as set out in the report says that with an award of costs, that award of the costs was to the council, not against the council. So the council applied for costs and was awarded a partial award of costs relating to the appeal. So it wasn't against us, it was for us. So yeah, apologies for if there was confusion in the wording.
If I may say so, that uncertainty, appeals go backwards and forwards, and I think it would be really helpful if we could, when that is reported, cost to the council or against the council would be helpful, so we know.
Unfortunately, it's just one of the fields in uniform that it pulls out. But yes, that was one I was going to clarify.
Yes. Okay. Any questions? No. Right. I don't know if it's my impression, but are the appeals coming through a bit more now? There was a big pause when there didn't seem to be any appeal responses coming through, but is it all moving a bit more swiftly now?
So the government, so PINS, apologies, has targets to deal with from April last year in terms of time frames, like we have time frames to deal with determining applications. They now have time frames to deal with determining appeals. So any appeals that have been submitted since they were being monitored and measured on their timeframes appear to be coming through in a more timely manner.
I'm very relieved to hear it. Thank you. Right. Can't see any questions on this. I just note that Councillor Richard Williams left. Right. Item 8 then. Sorry, can I just thank you and your officers for the work you're doing on that. I appreciate it's not easy, it's complex, and actually even keeping track of the data is difficult because it's rolling all the time. So thank you very much for giving us the data that you have, and we appreciate it. Moving on to agenda item 8. Sorry, do we need to note anything? No. Good. Right. Agenda item 8 then is excuse me, reform of planning committee's technical consultation, and this is looking at our response to that consultation. So Rebecca, did you want to take us through that?
Yeah, I'll be brief if that's okay, Chair. Members will recall, I think it was the 28th of May, the government published a consultation paper on the proposed reforms to planning committees. This seeks views on 3 aspects of reform, proposing to modernise planning committees, following the introduction of the Planning and Infrastructure Bill. Those 3 areas of reform relate to delegation of planning functions, size and composition of planning committees, and mandatory training for committee members. So the aim of the proposed changes is to bring about greater consistency, efficiency and professional rigour to the way in which planning committees operate. They've followed the introduction, as I've said, of the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, which is the government's delivery vehicle for the 1.5 million new homes target during the 5-year period, which is currently going through the House of Lords. The report and paper was circulated initially to all planning committees members, but following last month's committee meeting, there was a request that it went to all South Cambs members. So it was sent to all South Cambs members last month, setting out a summary of the proposed measures. Just for information, the proposed national scheme of delegation does align mainly with the Council's current scheme of delegation that was approved at full Council in May earlier this year. However, our response also suggests that a mechanism for call-in, which we do have here, where material planning issues are identified by objectors or parish councils or members, or where it's felt the proposal will benefit from public scrutiny, should also be introduced. So this is to ensure that planning continues to be seen as part of the democratic process, and to ensure that residents and communities have the opportunity to be involved in decision making. So if I can just thank the members that did take the time to respond, being actually all of them at planning committee today, so thank you. Though your responses have been woven into the report, thank you for noticing there's a mistake in the report as well. So there's an amendment to question 7A, the response that says applications for reserved matters for larger sites should be removed from tier B. Actually, that's incorrect, so it's just going to strike out that. However, on that basis, officers are recommending the planning committee note the contents of the report and authorise a formal response to be submitted on the basis of those responses suggested in the report, with that one amendment. Just to update you also that the similar report is on JDMC committee for next week, and it has also been sent to city committees, chairs, vice chair and spokes, because city don't have a planning committee prior to the deadline for the consultation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. I'm very happy with the proposed response, and I'm also very happy that we are ensuring arrangements for call-in. In the particular one that occurred to me was that at 5.4, when it refers to the applications that should fall within tier A, and one of those was telecommunications. Now, normally speaking, that should be okay, but I know that in the past we've had some quite contentious concerns about telecommunications, telephone masts being plonked in places that we didn't expect them, and so I'm very glad that we have an opportunity under the provision in section 5.5 to actually call that in if necessary.
Well, that's what we're recommending.
Yes, exactly, that's what we're saying.
We're suggesting they do that. Will they? Yes, as Councillor Sanford says,
So,
will they
so
listen?
that would require the local member or the parish council or 5 or more third-party requests to put that in. Councillor Dr. Toomey Hawkins, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, and thank you for compiling these responses. I think the one I am surprised at and perhaps not happy with is question 12, 5.12, where it's asking if the maximum number for planning committees should be 11 members, and we're saying no, a maximum of 12. But we have always gone for odd numbers, not even numbers. And I'm not sure why we're saying 12.
That's City. That's City. No, JDMC. Yes, it's run by City. But it's still
And from my experience, 12 hasn't been supported. I'm sorry, it just seems completely opposite.
If I can just clarify, so we've responded on the basis of the fact that we have, as a shared planning service, we have 3 planning committees, which includes JDMC, which I believe JDMC has 12 members because it's 3 from each, 6 from each, can't do my maths, 6 from South Cambs and 6 from City.
That's my understanding too. But Councillor Hawkins, did you want to make your point?
Yes, okay. In South Cambs, we've always gone for odd numbers rather than the joint service. I understand that. It's just when we have decisions that end up being tied, then you have the chair having to...
Yes, exactly. Although it doesn't always work because, sometimes it doesn't work like that. But what I wanted to say was, can you just clarify, what does the City Council Planning Committee, do they have 12 as well? Because the JDMC is administered from the City Council, and I just wondered, given that it has to be a number of people from both councils, but I wondered what the City Council numbers are.
It can vary. They can set the number of seats per year. It's not set.
No, okay. Just give us a pause while Rebecca checks.
Yeah, sorry about that, Chair. It's just, when I'm sitting in South Cambs, I just think South Cambs. I forgot about JDMC.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, this response is from the shared planning service as all 3 of them.
Yes, exactly. It's just that the statement says, from experience, an even number of members and a maximum of 12 is supported. Now that reflects what happens at JDMC, but I'm just wondering whether it actually...
13 at City.
So 13 at City, so they go for an odd number.
Sorry, can I just...
Yeah, Clara.
Just checking that.
8 at City?
Well, sorry, I was counting the 5 reserves.
Oh no, don't count the 5 reserves.
8 at City.
So they go for an even number, or have done this year, and I guess it can be changed as they choose, but we've tended to go for an odd number. So I think the point being that it's just that sentence, from experience an even number of members and a maximum of 12 is supported, because I think members here wouldn't say that that's true of this committee, but, do you want to talk to that?
Well, we have to represent all 3 committees, unfortunately, as we're doing a response as the shared planning service. So that's why we've actually put in there, including a joint committee, and that, I mean, we could add a line or an odd number.
It's okay, it's clarified. As I said, I was just thinking South Cambs. I'm sorry.
The only thing that occurred to me about... Sorry, Councillor Khan, did you want to speak? If you do put your microphone on and speak.
Sorry, perhaps one should say may be appropriate, because obviously the conditions are different. Where you've got 2 councils and you have to have equal representation, you're numbered with an even number. But here, that's not a consideration, and there's obviously an advantage having an odd number, because you're less likely to get a tied vote.
I think the question relates to whether or not it should be a maximum of 11, and I think our response reflects the fact that actually, no, we have 12.
for sound reasons.
From the point of view of somebody who has both sat on committee and also chaired it, the observation I make is that if you have 12 and there's a split decision, there's an opportunity for there to be a split decision, and then the chair has to make a chair's second vote. If you have 11 and everybody's attending, then it's less likely that the chair has to be the decision maker.
But in that case, if we had a joint committee, who would get less members?
No, I'm not saying that.
Just advocating in terms of if it's an
in
odd...
the circumstances where there is an even number of members, and there's a potential for a split decision, and the chair has to make that decision. If it's an odd number, that happens less frequently.
Yes, but I think in terms of the question about having a maximum of 11, we're simply saying, we've experienced 12. I could, instead of saying is supported, I could change it to can be supported.
Personally, I think it's more than acceptable as it is. I think we're going down a lane and we don't need to go down.
Okay, so in broad principle, I mean, it doesn't mean to say any committee couldn't have less. It's just saying a maximum of 12.
Yes. It's just that sometimes you think, if you say this maximum of 12, everybody just votes for 12.
Exactly. From my point of view, I wouldn't want there to be more than 12 because it's quite hard as a chair to manage the comments, and it takes longer to get through applications if everybody feels moved to make a comment. So I wouldn't want any more than a maximum of 12. So I support this statement. And thank you for putting in the option where we can call things in if we feel they're of concern. Just one other thing I wanted to ask about was at question 15 on our page 104. Do you agree that certification of planning committee members and of other relevant decision makers should be administered? Excuse me. Should be administered at a national level. Yes, I absolutely agree with that. But I just wanted to clarify, it says, I'm just assuming, it says the ability for local, however, this is subject to there being reliable, accountable processes for managing certification, that's fine, and the ability for local areas to provide their own mandatory locality-specific training. So I just wondered, so that specific training, I'm just saying, is that in person? Or training, so
not specified.
So it could be online or in person.
No, all we're simply saying is yes, we support a national level training scheme as long as there's a reliable and accountable process for managing it at the national level, and as long as we can still run our own local level training.
Stuff. Good. Okay, that's fine. Right. Okay.
On that point, will that still be through PAS, do you reckon?
What, sorry?
I'm just wondering if at the national level, it will still come through the Planning Advisory Service or could.
We haven't got that level of information as yet.
Yeah, okay.
What I wondered was whether it would be delegated, that the curriculum would be worked out nationally, but it would be delegated or?
Again, they're simply asking whether or not we could have a national level administered training scheme with certified for planning members. I don't believe we've got the details on how it's actually going to work.
Okay. And we've put in the caveat that if it's national training, it should be available on more than one date in case people are working. So that's good. Okay. So I have no further requests to speak. So we do need to take a vote on this. So the recommendation, members, is on page 2. It's at paragraph 2.1 on page 96.
Do you want me to repeat it again? So officers recommend that Planning Committee note the contents of the report and authorise a formal response to be submitted on the basis of the suggested response contained within the report, but the removal of the first bullet point under 5.7 A, which says applications for reserve matters for larger sites. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, hang on. 5.7.
Question 7A.
Are we on page 101?
102.
Sorry, the A is written at the bottom of page 101. So that's applications for permission, planning permission, aside from, and then the 3 bullets. Householder applications, minor commercial
The response
applications.
underneath that.
Okay, so however, the following should also be included in the exemption list. So these are the ones that would not be delegated.
Yes.
And that was applications for reserved matter approvals for larger sites.
Yes. So as I mentioned when I did the introduction, that we need to remove that from that list because we don't want that to be automatically delegated. It's there in
These
error.
are included in the exemption. I have to say this double negative is quite confusing. So the following should be included in the exemption list. This is exemption for, so these are tier B that
Which
would
are
be considered
exempt
by
from
committee.
delegated. Yeah. So
tier
A.
B is considered by committee.
Yes.
And so we're saying the following applications should go to committee.
So the question says, do you agree that the following applications should fall within tier B, as in they should go to committee? Yeah. And it says applications aside from householders, minor commercial and minor residential. And there's a mistake that we're saying that applications for reserved matters for larger sites should also not be in tier
so
B.
These should come to committee.
We're saying they should.
Removing them from that. Removing
Yes.
that bullet would be that they do come to committee.
Potentially, yes.
So can I just make the observation? I know this is probably written, but I had exactly that same jumping around the seesaw, trying to work out whether that meant they were included or not. So I just wanted to ask that, can we use the positive always instead of the exception?
It's the way the question's worded and the way the consultation's worded. So the consultation sets an exemptions list. So we're saying these need to be in the exemptions list.
Well done, whoever it was who spotted that and worked it out. And I'm looking
Councillor
at one
Redrup,
person
thank
who
you.
I suggest probably did it. Well done. Yes, Vanessa. So just before we go ahead, can I
just ask a question? So is it just the first of them or all of them?
No,
just the first one.
Just the first one. Okay,
Yeah.
I just want to make that to be
So
clear.
to be clear, that means that applications for reserved matter approvals for larger sites are not included in the exemption list. So they should come back to planning committee. Takes a better brain than mine to get that worked out. Thank you for that. Right, okay, so we need to go to a vote. So I'm going to propose that recommendation. Can we have a seconder? Councillor Corin Garvey, thank you. That'd be great. So let's take a vote on that, please.
Can't we just...
Can we? I think we have to take a vote on it. I think.
I mean, show of hands is
fine.
sufficient.
Hands is fine.
Yeah.
Okay, right. Let's do it by hands. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of us left. Thank you. Any against? Nope. Any objectors? No.
Abstentions.
Okay, so that's fine, that's carried, thank you.
Thank you. Are we done?
Right. So thank you very much, members. Just to clarify, our our next meeting will be on the 13th of August. So can I just clarify, are we all, the people here, available for that meeting?
Cancel.
Okay, so no Rebecca. So
No, don't do that.
Can I just ask members to make sure that you seek a substitute?
We will have a pre-app briefing, and then there's, at the minute, 6-ish applications, minors.
Are they all
I've moved the
minors?
majors to September when I'm back.
Okay, so quite a few. That might take some time. We've got six little ones. Right, thank you very much. So I'm going to close the meeting then at 13:28. Thank you very much, everyone, for your contributions.